Chapter 5 Part 1. Rain lashed the exposed stretch of beach below the split rock collapse, a cold, horizontal assault that stung cheeks and seeped through layers of waterproof gear. Angela tightened the drawstring of her hood, the familiar scent of salt, wet stone, and ozone sharp in her nostrils. The coastal cleanup felt different this year. Less like an obligation, more like a reclaiming. Ahead, Anthony wrestled a waterlogged tangle of fishing net draped over a jagged boulder. His movements were careful, deliberate, favoring his scarred left arm encased in a specialized neoprene sleeve beneath his rain jacket. He'd traded the Moretti cashmere for harbor's end practicality, sturdy boots, worn work pants, gloves with reinforced palms. Russo stood nearby, directing a group of volunteers hauling a bloated, barnacle-encrusted refrigerator carcass towards a waiting flatbed trailer hitched to the Persephone's tractor. "Need a hand," Angela called over the wind, slogging through the coarse, wet sand towards Anthony. He glanced up, rain plastering strands of blonde hair to his forehead. A flicker of that old, wry expression touched his eyes, the one that used to be arrogance, now tempered into something closer to self-deprecating resolve. "This net's fighting dirty. Seems to know I'm down an arm." He grunted, leveraging a pry bar under a stubborn knot. "Feels like it's anchored to Poseidon himself." Angela grabbed a section, her gloves finding purchase on the slimy synthetic fibers. "Teamwork, Moretti. Harbor's end style." They pulled together, muscles straining against the weight and the sea's stubborn grip. With a sucking pop, the net finally tore free, revealing a grotesque haul tangled within. Plastic bottles bleached white, a shattered crab pot, a child's waterlogged shoe, and the skeletal remains of a seabird. Anthony grimaced, carefully disentangling the bird. "The price of convenience," he muttered, his voice low. He placed the fragile bones gently in the designated biowaste bag. The gesture, small and respectful, spoke volumes of the distance he'd traveled. Russo clapped a heavy hand on Anthony's good shoulder. "Good pull." That fridge was the last big-ticket item. Mostly microplastics and ghost gear now. He scanned the beach, transformed from a debris field into a landscape of organized piles awaiting transport. "Wrap it up in 30, folks. Chowder's on at the community hall. Donated by yours truly." A ragged cheer went up from the volunteers, a mix of harbors and stalwarts and newcomers drawn by the Truth and Restoration Fund's publicity. As the group dispersed towards the access path, Angela noticed Anthony lingering near the base of the collapsed cliff face, where split rock had partially slid into the sea. He was staring at a newly exposed section, where the relentless winter tides had scoured away loose debris, revealing darker, water-slicked rock beneath. "What is it?" Angela asked, joining him. The wind whipped her words away. He pointed. "That fracture. It's new, wider than before." He knelt, ignoring the cold water soaking his knees, and probed the edge with his gloved fingers. "And look." He pulled back a thick curtain of glistening bull kelp clinging to the rock. Beneath it, wedged deep in the crevice, wasn't driftwood or plastic. It was a metal box. Corroded, barnacle-encrusted, but unmistakably man-made. Rectangular, about the size of a large shoebox, with a faint, ghostly outline of the Moretti Foundation crest barely visible beneath the marine growth. Angela's breath caught. "Roberts. Or Ben's," Anthony said, his voice tight. "Something they hid before everything." He glanced around. The other volunteers were trudging up the path, heads down against the rain. Russo was supervising the trailer hookup, his back turned. "Help me get it out." Carefully. The box was wedged tight, fused to the rock by years of salt and pressure. Using the pry bar and Angela's smaller knife, they worked patiently, chipping away at the mineral deposits, careful not to damage the metal. Finally, with a grating screech, it came free. It was heavier than it looked, dense with seawater trapped inside. They carried it between them, slipping away from the main cleanup site towards a sheltered overhang near the base of the cliffs, out of sight of the path above. Rain drummed on the rock above them, creating a curtain of water that shielded them. Anthony set the box down on a relatively flat stone. Using the knife, He chipped away thicker clumps of barnacles around the latch. It was rusted solid. He looked at Angela, a question in his eyes. She nodded. He positioned the pry bar, took a breath, and applied pressure. The rust screamed in protest, then gave way with a sharp crack. The lid lifted reluctantly, hinges groaning. Seawater, dark and smelling faintly of iron and decay, sloshed inside. Anthony reached in, his movements hesitant, almost reverent. He pulled out objects wrapped in oilcloth, surprisingly intact. The first bundle contained notebooks, familiar leather-bound journals like Robert's, but smaller, denser script. Ben's handwriting. The second bundle held stacks of microfilm canisters. The third. Anthony unwrapped it carefully. Nestled in the oilcloth were several thick glass vials, sealed with wax and rubber stoppers. Inside each vial was a dense, dark substance that looked like compacted soil or peat, interspersed with tiny, dark root fragments and minute, crystalline structures that glittered faintly even in the dim light. They were labeled with alphanumeric codes and a single word: source. Source? Angela breathed, leaning closer. Source of what? Anthony picked up the top notebook from Ben's bundle. He opened it to the first page. Ben's handwriting was rushed, intense, the ink blurred in places by salt water or perhaps tears. Asterisk log. August 15th, confirmed. Subject 0 wasn't found. It was asterisk planted. Deep core samples from the fracture bedrock show trace mineral signatures identical to soils from the Moretti Botanical Research Station in Costa Rica. Eleanor didn't discover Subject 0. She engineered it. Smuggled the precursor organism here. Seeded the fracture. Manipulated the environment to force the mutation. All to create her miracle toxin. Grandfather suspected, but she covered her tracks too well. Until now. This is the proof. The true source material. The original organism before she twisted it. Before split rock bled on command. Angela stared at the vials. The dark, glittering substance suddenly looked sinister. Not just a plant, but a weapon deliberately sown. She made the bleeding stone happen? Engineered the whole thing. Anthony's face was pale, his knuckles white where he gripped Ben's notebook. Not just the toxin, he whispered, his voice raw. She engineered the place. Made it sacred ground for her poison. He looked at the vials, then out at the churning gray water meeting the scarred cliffs. The salt. The stone. The fire, it was all part of her design from the beginning. We just walked into the final act. The implications crashed over Angela. Eleanor's control wasn't just financial or social, it was ecological. She hadn't exploited a natural wonder, she had created one to exploit. The horror was deeper, colder, than they'd ever imagined. A shout echoed down from the path above. Angela. Anthony. Chowder ain't gettin' any hotter. It was Russo. Anthony quickly rewrapped the vials and Ben's notebook in the oilcloth, bundling them with a microfilm back into the metal box. He closed the lid, the broken latch useless. We need to hide this. Somewhere safe. Until we know what this source really means. His eyes met Angela's, the storm from the beach mirrored in their depths. The cleanup might be over, Angela. But it seems we've just dredged up the beginning. He tucked the heavy, dripping box under his good arm, its weight a chilling counterpoint to the rust-streaked stone Angela unconsciously touched in her pocket. The rain continued to fall, washing the beach clean, but the stain Eleanor Moretti had planted deep within the stone of split rock felt suddenly, terrifyingly permanent. The tidal pools left behind weren't just full of water and life. They held the dark, glittering echoes of a meticulously manufactured sin.